Hello everyone, welcome. We're going to get started on the session around e-mobility. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes having a conversation around the trends, what's happening in e-mobility, and we're going to spend some time learning about some of those new innovations. And can you hear me? I'm getting a signal, you cannot hear me? You can hear me? You can hear me? Okay, I'll start that again. So here we're going to talk about e-mobility. What are the trends happening today in the market, and what are some of those innovations happening in the space of electric vehicle? So we're going to have the conversation. I'm going to have a few more speakers on stage with me in a minute, and then towards the end of the session, we'll have some time for you for Q&A. So please get ready with your questions. We will leave a nice space of time at the end. Joining me in a minute on the stage will be three entrepreneurs. So first one coming from China is Xiaoqian. We can call him Joe if it's easier. Joe is coming from a company called DST. The second joining in a minute will be Alex. Alex is coming from a company called Inno2Grid. And then finally we'll have Abdella joining us towards the end, coming from a company called VOLTA. So before we get into here about these interesting innovations happening, let's step back for a minute and take a look at what's happening in the EV space, in the electric mobility space. And what we have clearly seen in 2018 is an inflection point. In 2016, at the end of the year, there were roughly 1 million electric vehicles deployed. At the end of 2017, roughly 2 million. And now at the conclusion of 2018, we have over 5 million electric vehicles on the road. So clearly, there's been an inflection point, there's been a shift in the market just last year. Now, the majority of those vehicles are located in 3 key regions. That's China, that's Europe, and that's North America. Now, if we step back and look, even if we've seen this inflection point, 5 million cars, it's still only roughly 1.5%, 2% of the entire automobile market or stock. So still, as you can see on the right, we're still in the very early days of electric vehicle adoption. Now, there's a lot of discussion. This data is from Bloomberg, and what is the slope of the adoption rate going to be? Are there going to be 30% of vehicles electric in 2030? Is it going to take longer? Well, this we'll see in the next coming years, but no one can argue that the slope of the line is definitely heading in that direction. Now, in terms of adoption, what's driving adoption of electric vehicle? It's basically 3 things. The first one is the availability of those vehicles themselves. So around $300 billion are being invested by those OEMs to develop those electric vehicles in the next coming years. So in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, we're going to have much more availability of electric vehicles on the market. The second one is the economics. So the economics of owning an electric vehicle are almost there. From a transportation as a service or fleet, the total cost of ownership is already there. When we look at the passenger segment, until we have parity for the acquisition cost of the vehicle, that's the initial purchase price, we'll see a trend, and McKinsey is predicting parity for the acquisition cost of a passenger vehicle in the coming few years. The third one driving it is China. And here, if you look at the graph to your right, in the world today, there's roughly 425,000 electric buses. And of that 425,000, 421,000 are in China today. This is impressive. If you look at the US, less than 1,000. If you go to Shenzhen, in Shenzhen, all 16,000 municipal buses are electric today. All 22,000 taxis in Shenzhen are electric today. And it's not just Shenzhen. You have 30 other cities in China that have committed to electrify their transport by next year. So clearly China is going to be a factor. Now, at Schneider, when we look at the e-mobility opportunities, we're innovating in 2 ways. There's 2 pillars. We innovate at the core. So in the core business of Schneider, that's about our energy management, that's our power distribution, safety, reliability, people protection. But we also innovate what we call at the edge of the Schneider, or the edge of the company. And we innovate at the edge because in our core business, we're not always willing to take those big risks that maybe we need to take for new sectors like EV and e-mobility. So when we innovate at the edge, we have that ability to take larger risks, to work with some external companies, and probably go a bit faster than we could in the big core machine of Schneider. So today we're going to hear from these three companies coming from 3 continents with 3 different innovations. So we're going to start first with DST, which is represented by Joe in China. Then we're going to move to Europe with InnoTogrid and Alex. And then we're going to conclude in North America with Adela and VOLTA. And again, towards the end of the session, we'll have time for some Q&A. So now I'd like to invite Joe to the stage, representing DST. Joe, please tell us about DST and what are those innovations happening now?
DST is a Chinese company, is a startup, very young company. We only have 4 years old. In the past 4 years, we own and manage more than 25,000 electric vehicles for the logistic application in China. So in the past 4 years, we run our business from the 1 cities to be 110 cities in the countrywide. And we have 800 employees. So to support the logistic customer, more than the 1,500 employees customers. So on each days, there will be more than 1 million kilowatt hours charging will take place through our apps. There are also more than 20,000 drivers use our apps to manage their daily charging and daily service request. So that's some general information about the DST.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Now, just to be clear, Joe, you're operating today 23,000 electric logistic vehicles in 110 cities in China today.
Yes.
This is amazing, and this is really a scale, 23,000 electric logistic vehicles. I have a question though. Why did you choose electric vehicles for your fleet? Why not use the traditional internal combustion engine vehicles that we know and that are efficient? Why choose electric?
Well, there's pretty much 2 type of reasons. For the reason 1 is compared with petrol vehicles, the EV vehicle has obvious the cost efficient on the total ownership cost perspective. The second thing is compared with the petrol vehicles, EV vehicles has more be modularized and standardized. I mean, from the fleet management perspective, it's much more easier to maintain and manage the whole equipment.
Okay, so it's really, you're experiencing today the total cost of ownership is already there for you. You
Yes.
have an economic case to use electric vehicle, and it's bringing you operational efficiency today.
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
great. Now, another question. You've got 23,000 electric vehicles in 110 cities. How do you manage the charging of those vehicles on a daily basis? This is an enormous job to do.
Okay, it's a very good question. Actually, in both, there are almost every people will ask the same question. And we have 3 ways to manage the customer charging. The first one is we establish our own operating charge station, more than 2,000 chargers. We invest as a capex in the countrywide, 2,000 DC chargers. Mm-hmm. The second thing is we help our customer to invest their own chargers. We help them to have develop the right design. We help them to manage the project installation. So make sure that they could be connected to the whole system, help them to manage hold the chargers. The third way is we connect to the public charger service provider as many as possible. So far in our platform and the system, driver can access the 60,000 DC chargers through all the platform. So that's very convenient for the driver to use the EV cars in the countrywide. So that's how do we do on the charging solution.
Okay, so you're really managing a mix between public charging, your own charging, or charging at your customer site?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, Joe, thank you for that. We're going to hear back from Joe in a few minutes, but thank you, Joe. Let's switch now. Let's switch partners. Let's switch continents. So we're going to go next to Europe. So we're going to meet Inno2Grid. We're going to meet Alexander here. He's based in Germany. Alex, let's spend some minutes to understand what is Inno2Grid, what do you do, and what are your innovations that you've brought?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having us. I hope it's okay that I sit standing in the booth. Oh, fine. Okay. So Inno2Grid is we are well, our mission is actually what our name is. It's Inno2Grid means innovation to the grid, bring the innovation to the customer and to the grid. That's what we do on a daily basis. To understand where we come from, our team is working on EVs, working on microgrids for now 8 to 10 years. We started out in R&D projects, all based in Berlin at the EUREF campus, which is one of the showcases for smart districts, for EV, for electric mobility, and for sharing mobility. And we gathered a team and a partner network to help customers transfer the fleets, transfer the sites, and get EV ready right now. So we are the end-to-end partner for fleet customers and for any customer who has a fleet or a site to cope with the trend of EV. So we're helping them in a concept phase, in a consulting services. We help them with analyzing the mobility requirements the fleet or the company has on their employees as their customers. We help them then decide on the vehicle they want to integrate in the fleet, and we help them conceptualize their own tailor-made charging infrastructure, and thus we're actually complementing Schneider Electric's infrastructure portfolio in Germany and in the DACH region, Austria and Switzerland, with consulting services helping transfer, integrate EV into the fleet, and with operation service, because we help our customers with the billing, with the operation of the charging infrastructure they have at the homes of their employees and at the sites of their company.
Okay. By the way, you mentioned that in Berlin you're based at the EUREF campus, and I would really encourage all of you, if you're in Germany, if you're in Berlin, to go visit this campus. If you just Google Schneider Electric Berlin, our offices are actually based on the same campus, and you can see some live integration of microgrid, of electric vehicle charging, and there's a lot of innovation happening at this campus in Berlin. So I really would recommend you go see it. Alex, let me ask you one question though. It's great that you're helping your customers, what you say, convert from internal combustion engine to battery electric vehicle, but can you give us a concrete case, a concrete customer story? You don't have to mention the customer, but a concrete story on where you've had a request to help a company convert from internal combustion engine to battery, and what did that look like?
Sure. We're right now transferring on a conversion project with a customer which has 1,500 company cars within their fleet, and they set their goal to be sustainable, to reduce their CO2 footprint, and to leverage cost optimization potential within their fleet. And so they figured they would want to increase their fleet to 50% EV by 2021. So last year we were in a concept phase with that customer. We helped them analyze the mobility profiles of their employees, how the salespeople travel, how much they drive per day, how charging habits would have to change or would work then. We helped them setting up a tailor-made solution for charging at their sites. So they have mobility station in all their sites, or gonna have that in the future. And we help them package a deal for their employees. So every employee is getting a wall box at home, which is decentralized operated and is centralized built by us so every it has to be as seamlessly as having a gasoline car. So that concept phase has now come to an end. One important part was also to take the employees. So we did a lot of communication with our customer, a lot of information. We had on-site days to help them understand EV is fun, EV is electric vehicles are fun, are nice to drive, and actually don't have that much issues yet. So there's a network there and stuff. So now we're in the pilot phase. So 50 to 100 customer will change to EV. Consumers or employees will change to an EV this year, and so we're have a dry run for the bigger explosion in integrating the EVs into fleet, which will happen next year when Volkswagen and others will come and triple their offer of EVs in 2020.
Okay, so it's really a full end-to-end, I would call it an advanced service that you're offering. An interesting part that you take it in part of your scope to actually include the employees in the process. So it's not a matter of just changing the lease. It's about installing infrastructure at home. It's about understanding the driving habits. It's about the behavioral changes that are needed for an employee to change from, putting gas in the car to charging. So, very
exactly. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Alex. We'll have you back on stage in a few minutes for some more questions, but thank you. So the third partner we're going to hear from today, coming from the third continent, this time it's North America, is a company called VOLTA. So I'd like to invite Abdallah to the stage. And Abdallah, please tell us what is a VOLTA and what is your innovation?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having us and inviting us here. Let me start by saying, so VOLTA exists to accelerate the adoption of electric transport. But transportation today, depending on the continent, is responsible for between 25 to 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. Let me start by saying, in order to accelerate adoption or in order to get to mass adoption of the electric vehicle, we need three things. And Mike mentioned a little bit of that. The first thing is we need more sexy electric vehicles, not just more availability of models, but actually excite the majority of the population that is used to driving gasoline cars. Number two, we need reduction of we need more affordable models, which means we need reduction of the costs of the batteries, which has been happening and in fact has happened faster than has been forecasted to date. But at scale, it will keep happening. And number three, we need a charging infrastructure to tell the majority of the people who are used to only go to the gasoline station that they can actually charge everywhere they want to go. So VOLTA has focused on this third point. And more importantly, actually has focused on public electric vehicle charging that's going to tell a story to the community at large. So it was founded in 2010, and it's essentially started thinking about how to build expensive infrastructure with a viable return on it when there is real adoption or little utilization, and when actually selling electrons does not make that much money to get a payback on expensive infrastructure that needs to be not only that's expensive on the capital expense, but also expensive to maintain on the long term. So what VOLTA has tried a very unique model, and essentially it decided to sell photons to give electrons for free. And essentially it's a model that's based on advertisement. It's a little bit the Google model. You create something that's really useful and you monetize it through advertisement. So we essentially have been partnering with real estate owners, retailers, entertainment venues, stadiums, places where the community goes outside of home and work. And we designed essentially a product that's highly visible, very visible, and that can support digital out of home in places where it didn't exist before. So we essentially trade long-term agreements with real estate partners, with retailers, grocery stores, chains, and we maintain for the long term the infrastructure for them. We maintain it, we install it in very convenient locations, and we give the electricity for free. We essentially pay it ourselves, and we bring brands, here for example Alaska Airlines, to essentially put their image, pay for this, and get a huge engagement from the community at large. So the advertisement is not targeted to the EV drivers. The EV drivers benefit from an amenity, and essentially the community at large that does not actually know that some of these electric vehicles are electric, sees them in the places where they go. You can put the next slide. And what we've learned during the past 9 years, essentially, as we grow now in the US, over 18 markets, different in the majority of retail, high premium traffic locations, the model does three things. It's highly utilized because of the convenience. So we actually charge, on average, for every port that we put, 5 times more than the rest of the public electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the US. We actually have a consistent load during the day that can be also used to integrate renewables. And as a small company that's been growing, we've been doubling footprint every year, and literally in the past 3 years, tripling revenues. In the US, with 1% of the footprint, we actually capture 20% of the gross operating revenue that is actually not based on the utilization, and it drives high utilization. And this is the life of a VOLTA charging station in over a 24-hour time lapse in a place. Highly utilized, highly visible, and it accelerates EV adoption.
Great, thank you, Abdallah. I just want to make something extremely clear. I mean, this is innovation in business models. VOLTA is giving away charging for free. I don't know if you got that. They're giving away charging for free. And up until 24 hours ago, the charging that they were giving away for free was slow, or what's considered AC charging. But I saw an announcement 24 hours ago that now VOLTA is actually giving away DC fast charging for free, just announced 24 hours ago. So when you talk about disruption in business model, I mean, giving away fast charging for free is a disruption. Now, sticking on the business model point of view, I mean, you found a model that works for VOLTA, and obviously for your customers. Is this the winning model? Are there other business models that are going to win? Or how do you see that in terms of the innovation in business models?
I mean, this is a great question. The reality is we've been, until now, all fueling our cars the same way. We wait until it's empty, we go to the gasoline station, we fuel them up again. Once we switch to driving electric, I may want to take a show of hands here, who drives an electric car? Okay, so that's about right, about 1%.
No, we're there.
So we want to accelerate that. So what happens once you switch to electric, the fueling behavior becomes very different. The majority of your fueling is done at home or at work or in the places where you go in the public. And also, unless you take a long distance driving, which is not that often. So there is a complementarity. There needs to be innovations on the products themselves, the software platforms that support those. There needs to be innovation in the business models to have essentially ancillary services around what's really most valuable. And that's what's interesting with the electric vehicle. It's a triangle that brings together mobility, real estate, and energy. So there's going to be more and more innovation on business models, so ancillary services for the grid, ancillary services for the real estate owner, because what's very valuable, and that is what VOLTA does, we manage essentially what moves from being a parking space that becomes a charging space. And as mass adoption increases, we move from all those parking spaces becoming charging spaces. And, there is a lot of complementarity, and there's still a lot of innovation, not only on the business models, on the products as well.
Great, I can imagine. Okay, thank you, Abdallah. Just stay right there if you would. I'm going to invite back to the stage Joe and Alex. We'll get some chairs up here. You want to come on over, Abdallah? You can join us. Okay, so now we're going to have a Q&A session. I'm going to start with a few questions, address one to each. and then I'm going to open it to you in the audience. There'll be some microphones around, and we can take questions in English or Spanish and translate. So get ready with your questions. The first question I want to address is to you, Joe from DST. So, managing 23,000 electric logistic vehicles on a daily basis is a lot. I guess you can't do it manually. No. So tell us how IoT and how a digital platform helps you to not only be efficient operationally or even to survive operationally, but to really bring value to your customers and to solve their pain points.
Well, the digitalization is a very critical thing for the whole business model. To be honest, is very key. And we probably have 4 methods from the big picture. The first one is at the very beginning of the business, definitely you need to try to connect all the physical things as much as possible. No excuse. So at the very beginning, we connect all the vehicles, all the chargers through the gateways, wireless gateway. No matter where is it, we can connect with them at all time, at all the position. So we know all the information about the vehicle status. The second thing is connect your decision makers to bring all the employee online to make sure they have real-time the data to make right decision. So another thing is to connect all the supply chain and the service partners, like insurance partners. We're never going to process all the insurance activities manually. So including buy the insurance or the process any incident case. So all the online. The fourth thing is to be emphasized is to connect your customer as early as possible. Give you SDK, give you API to your customer. Make sure you and your customer online together. So that offer you the great advantage than your competitors, because you can provide more high speed response to your customer than your competiters. So
in your example, the IoT platform has really enabled your business, and
sure.
Without it,
it's a backbone.
It's a backbone. Okay, yeah. Alex, Abdallah, any reaction to that?
Sure. Yeah. When the customer example I gave, operation and billing for those, the charging has to be as seamless as the fueling has been with ICE. So, but now you have a distributed network that has to be smart. It has to be connected to a platform to automate the billing, to automate when you charge at home, you want the money back from your employer. So it is the basis to EV adoption, to have a platform which connects all of that and to build services on top of that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is a good point, and this comes back to what I mentioned about ancillary services around the electric vehicle. The electric vehicle becomes actually a resource for the grid. It becomes also the potential for other services for the real estate owners, for instance. And so there is huge amount of potential and opportunities for development of all these new services. And as Joe mentioned, it becomes the backbone of a distributed system. And now we've barely scratched the surface there. There are quite a bit of pilots, essentially, on vehicle to grid or just basic demand response. But when we go to mass adoption, literally, the grid is going to have to deal with doubling of the amount of kilowatt hours that are delivered, with mass adoption of electric vehicles. And it's a good thing. But that can only be done if there is a smart platform that manages the distribution, and especially the distribution of not fixed meters, but now essentially moving meters that move around and that roam between networks and between grids and between operators.
Great, thank you. Second question, I'm going to address to you, Alex. We heard from you, you had some customer stories about converting from internal combustion engine to battery electric. At Schneider today, here we have around 3,000 customers in the room today, and we get requests almost on a weekly basis. Schneider, can you please help me convert my internal combustion engine fleet to battery electric? So my question for you, and maybe we have the similar question in the audience, is what advice would you give to those customers sitting here or maybe outside about how do you do it? What do you need to do? I have the ambition, I have the motivation, maybe I even have the money, but what's the next step? How do I proceed?
Well, at first, Jean-Pascal Tricoire said it yesterday. It's with any transformation, you have to be open, you have to be willing to learn and take risks, and that is actually key to first of all. And you have to take your employees, your stakeholder with you, because there's a change, how we said, for your suppliers, there's a change for your employees, there's a change for anyone in your company with EV. So use it as a chance. And in the end, we advise, and I said that, to start early, to try out, to do by pilots which are scalable, not pilots which are going to be turned down again because technology is not that far yet. These are pilots. You start now. You have to find your pioneers within your company, which are the ambassadors for EV within your company. So and then it will become a movement within a company. That's what we figured in most of our, or in all of our customer cases, that as soon as you start, it keeps rolling, and it's more like it's just like a platforming thing with which starts to take off as soon as the EVs are, how you said it, nice, sexy, and not just the ugly car in the back of the dealership.
Okay, thank you. Abdallah or Joe, any follow-up?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. Last question, and then we'll open it to you in the audience, is for Abdallah. You know, Abdallah, we've seen you and heard you speak in the past at various places, and you always bring this angle on the social change required. And here you're very intimate with consumers, you're advertising to them, you know, they're touching your charger. So tell us about this social change. What do you mean, this social change that's required for EV adoption?
So this is where it's really interesting. I think we humans are hardwired to be comfortable with what we know, and change, cultural change, is difficult. And our vehicles are actually, for a big majority of us, especially in the US, for instance, it's not only a status symbol, it's a freedom symbol. It's something that literally we don't seem to be able to get away from. And
it's personal,
right? We're willing to actually be by ourselves in congested traffic jams, and we're willing to suffer just to have that little space of freedom. And so changing that is actually difficult. And we like to say that what we're doing at VOLTA, and I mentioned initially that we exist to accelerate the adoption. We always like to say we are essentially doing a big experiment in social change. A couple of numbers. Like, what's really interesting, when we go pitch to a retailer, a real estate owner, and say, hey, look, we're going to provide you with infrastructure at no cost and with long-term service, just give us your 4 best parking spots at the entrance of the building. Sometimes they tell us, well, we already have electric vehicle charging stations. No one uses them. Well, let me guess. You bought them, and then you went to check how expensive it would be to install them, which meant that you optimized your installation for cost, which means you put them in the back of the building because that's where the electrical service usually comes. What about putting them in front so that people see them? That's what we will do. And then we do that, and we design them to be very visible. And I mentioned it turns into high utilization, but most importantly, it's talking to all the people that don't drive an EV. If you look at the electric vehicles that exist today, 60% of the population don't even know that an electric Golf is electric, or that even a Tesla is electric. You and I might know that, but the majority of people don't know that car is electric. But now, because we put electric vehicle charging at the entrance of very public, high traffic locations, which is actually the way we monetize them, thanks to advertisement, what it actually does, it essentially tells a story and educates the community at large about, like, hey, look, those vehicles are actually electric. Look, they're plugged. And so that creates a virtuous cycle of education and of promotion And in fact, we typically commission independent studies to give measurements on the return on investment on the sponsorship for the brands that pay for that infrastructure. And one of the questions we often ask is, how likely are you to adopt an electric vehicle? And between 70 to 80% of the population, of the community that sees this charging station, just the fact of seeing them, they essentially say that they will consider an electric vehicle in the next car purchase, especially when it says, hey, free electric charging, courtesy of, Deutsche Bank or Schneider Electric.
Great. Alex or Joe, any follow-up to that?
Okay.
From a fleet operator perspective, is we've been hardwired. Like the new generation is not that hardwired anymore, and it's not that connected to cars anymore. It's connected to mobility. So it's a chance for any employer to rethink their mobility, the company mobility, to think about new ideas and maybe win a few talents via offering new mobility services, EVs, and being at the forefront of that technological change and that societal change. So it is a chance for an employer as well.
Great.
I want to give some additional message about social change. For example, in China, actually, change brings from the government. The government put a lot of push on the whole change. So one hand, they set up the more and more strictly regulation for the petrol, for the city. Another hand, to give them more and more beneficial and the incentive to the EV. So it's changing. So you can say in the Shenzhen, all the taxi are EV, all the public bus are EV. So people get to be more familiar with that. So that's a big change, I think.
Clearly. Okay, so we've heard from 3 partner companies of Schneider coming from 3 continents, each bringing their own innovation. With the remainder of our time, we're going to open up the space to you. So we've got a couple of microphones somewhere. There they are over here. So you can ask your question in Spanish or English. Okay, we'll go right here in the middle. First question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we operate a fleet in the UK of around 1,200 company vehicles. 35 to 40% of those are now plug-in hybrid or EV. We have an infrastructure at our head office throughout our 220 locations, and also colleagues that have EV or plug-in hybrids have a charger at home. Now, one of the issues that we face in the UK, I suppose, is that travelling up and down the country, sometimes you need maybe 3 or 4 different RFID cards or logins for your mobile. So it can become a bit complicated to be able to navigate your way through that. Do you have any insight as to how that will progress in the future? Will there become standardized open protocol across many of the EV chargers?
Okay, I'll take that one. So this is a great question, and I think it's an evolution. We mentioned that there is a complementarity of models. There is a lot of innovation and experimentation, and so we're essentially building that infrastructure, and it's being built not fast enough, but also it's being built by different companies, each of them, and so there is some innovation on the platform and products, as I mentioned, but also it's a natural evolution. There are going to be more and more cooperation, or we can call it co-petition, where essentially agreements and interoperability platform and the ability to roam in between. So if I have an agreement with one company to charge, I will be able to use my app, my phone, pay as you go, or even the typical RFID card. So I would say that the RFID card will probably go away, for the simple reason that we now have that on our app, on our phone. There'll be pay-as-you-go. There will be also pressure by the regulators. So Joe mentioned the government. In fact, in California right now, the Air Resources Board has adopted at the end of June a mandate to install credit card readers in every charging stations by 2022. So essentially the whole pay-as-you-go. That doesn't solve everything, but we look in California, like 8 of the different companies have announced essentially agreement to partner. So you have a membership with one, you can access the others. So it's a process, it's an evolution, but it's true that that's also something that may be an obstacle in the beginning.
Yeah. And what we hear from our partners and our even sometimes our competitors, we see a nice correlation between the EV charging industry and the telecom industry. So essentially, in telecom, you have a phone or a tablet, but in EV you have a car. And in telecom there's an antenna to catch the signal, in EV it's a charger. And then after that you have an operator behind that and a network. So we can imagine in the future that the EV charging network will behave much more like a telecom network than it does today. Thank you for the question. Second question was somewhere in the middle. I don't know, okay.
¿Español?
Yeah.
Español, sí. ¿Qué tal? Muy buenas. La pregunta era para los tres. He visto, agradeceros ante todo la expansión que estáis teniendo. ¿Y para cuándo aquí en España? ¿Para cuándo venís?
Hoy. Today.
Well, for the EV fleet management, actually is we are doing some market investigation for the local, and we're trying to work with some potential partners, say how we can leverage all the experience from China, because the EV fleet management, the key is a skill. It's a skill-based economic. So we have a lot of experience on this area. So say if we can have a right partner work together in the local, and that's something we are planning.
And we are already here too, as we partner with Schneider, and Schneider can help you with transferring your fleet the same way as we do. With our knowledge from Germany, we bring that to here.
Right, and at Schneider we're actually relaunching our business in Spain. So as part of that relaunch, we'll have not only our Schneider offer, which is power distribution and charging, but also over time, when there's a case, we'll start to invite our partners as well. So it's coming, the time is now. I would invite you to visit our booth inside the commercial industrial space, where we have a large Spanish contingent that you can connect with. Okay? Thanks for your question. We have time for probably 2 more questions. I saw you first over here, so.
Perdón, yo quería hacer
the
una
last question
de la
over here.
Quería hacer una pregunta de la sobre VOLTA, ¿vale? Ha dicho que estaba cargando en alterna a 4,4 kilovatios, creo recordar. Ahora con las cargas en continua, ¿qué subida de potencia tenemos?
So far the majority of our network has been 7 kilowatt AC, which is the typical in the US grid. And we announced yesterday that we've been making experiments with deploying DC between 50 to 100 kilowatt.
For free, right? For free.
Yeah, the first 30 minutes free,
yep.
Actually. And I think what's really important, I mentioned different public places. Each of them has a different use case. If you go to the movie theater, you don't necessarily need DC fast charging. If you go to a grocery store where you're going to go for 30 minutes, then that 30 minutes can be, 200 kilometers of charge. So what we do is, and we actually have been using a lot, and we hear that everywhere, but like machine learning and quite a bit of accumulation of data to map and design and where the highest utilization. So we're not trying to be the largest or to put electric chargers everywhere. We're trying to put chargers where they're going to be highly utilized and have impact. So essentially, we maximize the miles delivered or kilometers delivered for every dollar that we invest in the ground.
Okay, great. We're out of
¿Tenéis
time.
fecha de
Let's take one more
instalación
question
aquí en
from the
España,
gentleman
la
just over
primera?
here. If you can please pass the microphone.
Hola, buenos días. Gracias por vuestras intervenciones. Antes habéis mencionado 3 claves para la expansión de la movilidad eléctrica, que son 3 muy conocidas, pero a mi modo de ver hay una cuarta de la que se habla yo creo que poco, que tiene que ver con la configuración de las ciudades europeas y singularmente las españolas, donde hay millones de vehículos que duermen cada noche en las calles o que duermen en un parking subterráneo en una comunidad de vecinos. La mía tiene cerca de 500 vehículos. Ya sé que no hay ningún problema poner 10 o 12 puntos de carga para vehículos eléctricos, pero 300 al mismo tiempo pues seguramente va a generar un problema. Entonces, ¿cómo creéis que se va a abordar esto en Europa y qué es lo que se puede hacer o qué perspectivas creéis para algo que realmente puede suponer un freno al desembarco masivo del vehículo eléctrico?
Sure. Maybe I'll start, and I know all 3 of you will probably want to comment, but when we look at, charging infrastructure, and you've given an example of, someone in a commercial or multifamily residential, maybe there's commercial space on top, I don't know. But anytime you go and install an electric vehicle charger, you need to revisit the entire power distribution. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to pull a brand new service, a new utility feed. With software, we can actually manage the loads, do load balancing, find the right time to charge. If all the charge connect at the same time and it's night, we can do some shared load. So I think software is going to have a big play, especially inside the building, in terms of how we manage that energy. And we're convinced at Schneider that we don't necessarily need to have a full 22 kilowatt charger available at every moment of every day inside of every building. Rather, we can rely on software solutions to do load balancing, what energy is available in the building, what's not available, the heat's on, the heat's off, and find the right timing to push the energy to the vehicle versus having a full availability. So I think software is going to be one of the key answers to that question. Anybody else want to complement?
No, I think that's a very valid point, but also I think the cities also have a role to play in terms of residential parking in cities and so on the right of way. When I mentioned real estate partners, that they can be public or private.
Great. Okay, we're out of time. I think all of us would love to stay another 1 hour, but we're out of time, so we're going to conclude. Thank you very much for your attention and for your questions, and we'll see you out in the event space. Thank you.
Thank you.